Welcome back. We continue to follow the breaking news involving former President Donald Trump. The former president saying he's been notified he's a target of the United States probe into overturning the 2020 election.
You found this out because on Truth Social, Trump wrote this, quote, deranged Jack Smith, the prosecutor with Joe Biden's DOJ, sent a letter again. It was Sunday night stating that I am a target of the January 6th grand jury investigation and giving me a very short 4 days to report to the grand jury, which almost always means an arrest and indictment. Nikki Haley, former UN ambassador and South Carolina governor, of course, Trump's opponent on the Republican side of the race for the White House, is joining us live here. We do appreciate your time and thank you so much for coming on. This news broke this morning. I'm sure you've seen it. Now you have. What is your initial reaction to this?
I have said Trump was the right president at the right time, but this is going to continue to happen. You're going to continue to see lawsuit after lawsuit, indictment after indictment, which is why we've said we've got to go in a new direction. We have to have a new generational leader. We've got to leave this chaos and negativity behind. They're not going to stop. It's never going to stop. And we've got real issues at hand. We're $32 trillion in debt. Families are feeling inflation. They're feeling the lack of transparency in the classroom. They're seeing record crime on the streets. They've got an open border. And now we're seeing a national security policy that's in shambles. We've got some serious work to do. We can't have distractions. We can't continue to go down this path. We've got to start looking forward with new solutions in a strong way.
If I could ask, Ambassador, if you were to be in the White House, what would you do to ensure that there is not a two-tier system of justice and that justice is distributed equally, regardless of political affiliation?
I would do exactly what I did in South Carolina. I replaced the heads of every agency. I went in and sent teams in to clean each agency up, to get rid of bureaucracy, to get rid of old, any old bills, to get rid of any problem children. And in some cases, we tweaked agencies. In other cases, we gutted agencies. I think if you look at our intelligence agencies, you look at the Department of Justice, they need to be gutted. The American people have lost all trust in them. But I think we've got to look at the IRS. I think we've got to look at some other ones. And I'll tell you, I'll go a step further. Presidents typically meet with their governors once a year. I will meet with the governors once a quarter. We need to get the parts of federal government and send it down to the states, whether it's education or healthcare or benefits. Empower the people. Let's reduce the size of the federal government. Let's empower what the people in the states can do, and that's how we'll get the United States back on track.
And talking about investigations, there was one that really was taking the headlines here. The Secret Service looking for cocaine in the White House. That investigation has concluded, again, according to the U.S. Secret Service. I wanted to play this for you. This is how the White House responded to it, and then get your take. Here's that.
The Secret Service did a thorough investigation. Certainly not going to opine on the investigation. Of course, we're going to have confidence that they're going to do their jobs and do everything that they can to get to the bottom of this. Of course, that is something that we have confidence. We will always have confidence in that. There is hundreds of visitors that traveled through this area where the cocaine was found across that weekend. And so I'm going to leave it to them for any additional information.
Again, official response here from the White House is the investigation has been closed. As you know, the cocaine location has changed twice now. You've called the action surrounding how the White House and how the Secret Service have handled the investigation into the cocaine at the White House a cover-up. Who do you think the culprit is, and what do you make of this, and why do you think it's a cover-up?
The lack of accountability is appalling here. I have been in that area. It is right near the Situation Room. This is where a few people are able to have access to. Typically cabinet directors related to the National Security Council and their deputies. You don't have a big group of people coming in and out of that area. Not only that, everybody that comes into that area has to sign in. They have to be allowed into that area. So they know who was in that area during that time. And the fact that they're closing this case, the fact that they're not giving us any information, shows this was someone that was close to the president. That's not guessing, that's a fact. Normal, regular, everyday people can't get near the Situation Room. It's a very secure area. And so this is an unacceptable answer. The fact that Joe Biden doesn't want to know whose cocaine it was, it makes you question it further. The fact that they had marijuana in there last year and nothing was said about that makes you question this, and it makes you question the credibility of every cabinet member and the people working around the president. It's appalling, and we continue to see them just surface over these issues that really alarm the American people.
Yeah, no answers, no suspects. Investigation is closed. Wanted to pivot to this, culture-related issues. I know, Ambassador, you've been pretty outspoken about fighting for women's sports to stay an equal playing field for women. But what we're seeing on your screen here, Maybelline makeup ad featuring a biological male who's selling the product here. You've previously been outspoken against Dylan Mulvaney, again, a transgender influencer involved in a Bud Light campaign, also who dresses as a woman and submits and creates videos showcasing so-called what it means to be a girl. If you could just comment on your view of how this gender identity has really sort of entered the mainstream, and what might you do to protect biological women if you were to serve in the White House?
The idea that biological men are playing in women's sports is really one of the worst women's issues we've got during this time. And my daughter ran track in high school. The idea that I would even have to have a conversation with her, I wouldn't even know what to say. How do we get our girls used to biological boys in their locker room? You can't. You see, Johns Hopkins recently came out with the definition of a woman. It was a non-man. I mean, all of this, and then you see what's happening with Dylan Mulvaney and with Maybelline. I mean, it's making fun of women. And, you know, I'll just say, we should be focusing on the fact that strong girls become strong women become strong leaders. Why are a third of our teenage girls last year, why did they seriously contemplate suicide? So, look, anybody can use Maybelline products, and Maybelline can advertise any way they want, but I would tell them to look at Bud Light. This is not going to end well for you. This is not what the American people want to see. We don't want it pushed in our faces. We don't want it pushed in our homes. And if they really care about their profits, they'll do something about it, but we'll care about it with our wallets, that's for sure.
When you see things like that, obviously with Dylan Mulvaney, something we're talking about with Bud Light, you've seen many American consumers steer away from Bud Light and using that beer. It's now, what, 14th, 15th beer, used to be the #1 beer. You now see Maybelline here switching up their campaign. Is Maybelline products, is that something that you would use?
No, not at all. You know, what the part that bothers me is I don't mind anybody living their life any way they choose to live it. But don't put it in our faces. Don't force us to accept something. That's not America. That's not what we do. Yes, we appreciate our freedoms, but don't go so far to tell us what it is we should like and not like. And I think that's what they're doing. So, no, I mean, just like Bud Light's never going to be in our home, and neither is Ben & Jerry's, and neither is Maybelline. I mean, we vote with our pocketbooks on this, and I think you'll see the American people do that. But these companies, one after the other, are learning you can't force us to agree or like with anything you're trying to push. Let us handle it on our own. Let us handle it in our households. Quit pushing it in our schools, and we'll make sure we stop all of that. And I think that that's the problem with our culture, is they're now trying to see how they can push the most radical views. What we want to do is go back to faith, family, and country. That's what made our country great. Go back to the values that made our country great in the first place.
All right, and we'll wait and see, again, what the American public are hungry for when it comes to a candidate to best represent them in Washington. As we discuss this race for the White House, we took a look at some of the polling currently vying, of course, for the Republican presidential nomination. We've got some recent polls to share with you here. A YouGov poll shows you at 3% compared with former President Trump, who's leading the pack with 49%. Of course, the Iowa caucuses still a long way away in the primaries. But based on the polling we've seen, and it's not just this poll, it's several other national pollings, how do you plan to improve yourself in the ranking?
Well, we're not surprised at where we are because we haven't spent any money. You know, the rest of the candidates are spending millions of dollars. We're not. We're holding on to ours because this isn't the time that people are paying attention. The national polls aren't the ones we're worried about. We're going to be looking at Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina for right now. We wanted to have a good launch. We had a few thousand people in Charleston, South Carolina, which is what we wanted to see. We continue to see that we're well received in Iowa and New Hampshire. We're doing town halls. We're not taking any shortcuts and just doing rallies and leaving. We're touching every hand. We're answering every question. We had 160,000 donations from all 50 states. 95% of those were less than 200. So we're very comfortable about where we are, but we haven't started to spend yet. When we start to spend, that's when we expect the numbers to go up. But right now, I'm an accountant. I'm not a lawyer. I really am smart with how we spend. We're on a lot of JetBlue and Spirit airline flights. We stay in a lot of garden inns, but we're going to make sure that every dollar that's donated to us is put towards communicating with the people in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and across this country. So stay tuned. That'll be happening. We're looking forward to the debates next month. We're going to be on that debate stage. It's going to be a good time.
Really quickly, before we let you go, if we could ask, if indeed, though it does end up where Trump is the nominee, DeSantis is the nominee, or anyone else is the nominee other than yourself, would you consider a cabinet position? Would you consider a VP position with the nominee?
I don't play for second. I've never played for second. I'm not going to start now. If anybody is looking for an accountant, a daughter that understands the greatness of America, this military spouse whose husband is deployed, a mom who understands that our kids need to go back to the basics in school and they shouldn't have to be writing papers of things they don't believe in. If you're looking at getting our country back where we're strong and proud again, go to NikkiHaley.com. We're going to make sure that we right this ship. We have to do it. We've got a country to save. We cannot afford a President Kamala Harris, and we're going to make sure we finish this.
All right, we'll leave it right there. Ambassador Nikki Haley, again, vying for the GOP nomination for president. Thank you so much for taking the time to join National Report today.
Thanks for having me on.